My wife and her billionaire lover ruined my architecture company. You will die poor, she laughed. At 56, working as a janitor, and I injure my arm. The doctor checked my blood, went silent, and stared at me. Sir, your DNA shows something extraordinary. You are related to... Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what city you're watching us from. My name was Armando. I had an architecture firm in Mexico City. I wasn't a millionaire, but I lived well. I designed residential buildings, small commercial complexes, houses for middle-class families. My office had 6 employees. We billed between $50,000 and $300,000 annually. Nothing extraordinary, but it was mine. I built it with my own hands for 20 years. Every project carried my signature, my effort, my sleepless nights reviewing blueprints. Ingrid had been my wife for 18 years, or at least that's what I thought. A beautiful woman, 15 years younger than me, with ambitions I could never completely satisfy. She wanted more. Always more bigger houses, more expensive trips, jewelry I couldn't buy without going into debt. I worked 12 hours a day, trying to give her what she asked for, but it was never enough. One day, 2.5 years ago, I got home early. It was 3 in the afternoon. I canceled a meeting because my head hurt. I heard laughter in our bedroom. Her laughter, the laughter of a man who wasn't me. I opened the door. Ingrid was in our bed with Ricardo Salazar, the owner of Salazar Real Estate Group, one of the richest developers in Mexico. A man who built luxury towers, residential complexes for millionaires, gigantic shopping malls. A man with an estimated fortune of over $500 million. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't ask for forgiveness. She just looked at me with contempt and said, "It was about time you found out." Ricardo got dressed calmly, as if he were in his own house. He looked me up and down and smiled. "No hard feelings, buddy, it's just business." I didn't understand what he meant by that until 3 months later. Ingrid asked for a divorce immediately. I was devastated, but I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I had my dignity, or so I thought. We signed the papers at her lawyer's office. She kept the house, the car, the savings accounts we'd built together. I didn't fight. I just wanted it to end quickly. While signing the last page, Ingrid leaned towards me and whispered with a cruel smile, "You're going to die poor, Armando. Ricardo promised me a life you could never give me. Soon your company won't even exist." I didn't understand that last sentence, but I soon would. 2 weeks after the divorce, the problem started. Clients canceling contracts without explanation. Suppliers suddenly demanding payments in advance. The bank denied me a loan that was already approved. 3 of my 6 employees resigned on the same day, hired by bigger companies that offered them double the salary. I tried to stay afloat, but it was as if someone were sabotaging every step I took, and someone was doing it. 6 months after the divorce, I discovered the truth by chance. An old client called me, ashamed. He told me Ricardo Salazar had been contacting all my clients, offering them impossible-to-refuse discounts if they canceled their contracts with me and hired his company. He'd also talked to my suppliers, subtly threatening to close other doors for them if they kept working with me. Ricardo Salazar was deliberately destroying me. Why? Because I was competition. Because even though my company was small, I'd won 3 important bids for municipal projects he wanted, projects that would have given him access to even bigger government contracts. And Ingrid knew it. She'd planned it with him from the beginning. Sleeping with me, marrying me, waiting for me to have something valuable, and then destroying me so Ricardo could take my place. 8 months after the divorce, my company closed. There were no more clients. There was no more money. I had to sell my office to pay debts. I sold my car. I sold everything of value I had. I was left with nothing. At 56, I found myself living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a dangerous part of the city. The building smelled of dampness and garbage. The walls had cracks. The window faced an alley where I sometimes heard screams in the early morning. I needed to work. I needed to eat, but nobody hires a 56-year-old architect who lost his company. I sent hundreds of resumes. Nobody replied. I finally got a job as a janitor in an office building. I cleaned bathrooms, mopped floors, took out the trash. I earned $800 a month, barely enough to pay rent and buy cheap food. I, who designed buildings, now cleaned the bathrooms of buildings others designed. Every night, lying in my old bed that creaked with every movement, I looked at the stained ceiling and thought of Ingrid's words, "You're going to die poor." She was right, or so I thought, because 2 years after losing everything, on a random November afternoon, while cleaning the third-floor bathroom, a broken glass cut my arm. It was a deep cut, it bled a lot. My supervisor told me to go to the municipal hospital. I didn't want to go. I had no health insurance, I had no money to pay for consultations, but the cut wouldn't stop bleeding. So I finally took the subway and went. The municipal hospital was full of people. I waited 3 hours before they saw me. Dr. Elena was a woman in her 40s with her hair tied back and deep dark circles from working so much. She stitched my arm without saying much. "I'm going to order some blood tests," she said, "just routine to rule out infections." I nodded. I didn't think it was important. They drew my blood. They told me to wait for the results. I sat on an uncomfortable plastic chair for 40 minutes, watching other people go in and out. Then I heard my name over the loudspeakers. "Armando, consultation room 3. I went back to the room where I'd been treated. Dr. Elena was standing holding a paper. Her face had changed completely. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked shocked. "Mr. Armando," Dr. Elena said, "I need to ask you some very specific questions about your family." I was confused. What does my family have to do with a cut on my arm? She didn't answer. Instead, she called a nurse over the intercom. "I need Dr. Medina from genetics to come. Urgent." Then she looked at another nurse who was in the room. "Call Dr. Ruiz and Specialist Gomez." Now my heart started beating faster. What's happening? Do I have a disease? "It's not a disease," she said quietly. "It's something completely different." In less than 5 minutes, there were 4 people in that small consultation room. They all looked at me with a mix of amazement and disbelief. One of them, an older man with thick glasses, took the paper with my results and read it 3 times in a row. "Do you know who your biological father was?" Dr. Ruiz asked. My father's name was Fernando. I replied, "He died 12 years ago." "Why?" The doctors exchanged glances. Dr. Medina, a thin woman with gray hair, approached me. "Armando, your genetic markers are extremely unusual. We've only seen them in very specific case studies. They appear in less than 0.01% of the world population." I don't understand what that means. "It means," Dr. Ruiz chimed in, "that you could be related to someone very important, someone whose DNA is in our databases for legal reasons." My mind couldn't process what they were saying. Legal databases. Dr. Elena took a deep breath. 3 years ago, when the tycoon Don Sebastian Montalvo died, a very complicated succession process was opened. He didn't leave recognized direct heirs. His DNA was registered in the judicial system for possible future claims. The markers you have are identical to his. I knew that name. All of Mexico knew that name. Don Sebastian Montalvo had been one of the richest men in the country, owner of Montalvo Construction, a building empire worth billions of dollars. He'd built half of the corporate towers in Mexico City, airports, bridges, hospitals. His fortune was estimated at $2.8 billion when he died, and these doctors were suggesting I was his relative. "That's impossible," I said. "There must be a mistake." "That's why we need to do more tests," Dr. Medina said. "More specific tests. If what these preliminary results indicate is correct, you could be Don Sebastian Montalvo's biological son." The room started spinning. I held onto the stretcher where I was sitting. My father was Fernando. I knew my father. I lived with him all my life. "Is your mother still alive?" Dr. Elena asked softly. "No, she died 8 years ago." "Did she ever mention having met Don Sebastian Montalvo?" I didn't know what to answer. My mother, Lilia, had been a reserved woman. She worked as a secretary in several companies during her youth. She met my father Fernando when she was 25. They got married quickly. I was born 8 months after the wedding. 8 months. I never thought about that before. I always assumed it had been a premature pregnancy. But now with these doctors looking at me like I was a ghost from the past, that detail took on a completely different meaning. "I need you to sign a consent for advanced DNA testing," Dr. Ruiz said. "They're free. The hospital will cover them because this case has important legal implications." I signed, not because I believed it was true, but because I needed them to let me go. I needed to get out of there and forget that absurd conversation. They told me the results would be ready in a week. I left the hospital with my arm bandaged and my mind completely confused. During those 7 days, I couldn't think of anything else. I tried to remember everything I knew about my family. My mother, Lilia, had been a beautiful woman in her youth. I saw photographs of her when she was 20. Bright smile, expressive eyes, long black hair. She worked in the corporate sector before getting married. Then she dedicated herself to being a housewife when I was born. Fernando, the man I called Dad, had been an electrical technician, a good, hard-working, quiet man. He taught me to be honest, to work hard, to value what one has. We were never rich, but we never lacked anything. He supported me when I decided to study architecture. He paid for my first college semesters with his savings. Was it possible he wasn't my biological father? Was it possible my mother had kept a secret her whole life? I searched the internet for Don Sebastian Montalvo. He died at 83 from a heart attack. He wasn't married. He had 2 important public relationships, but never had recognized children. His fortune was left in a legal limbo. Several distant relatives tried to claim the inheritance, but none could prove a direct connection. The company kept running, managed by a board of directors, but without a real owner. I looked at photographs of Don Sebastian when he was young. A tall man with strong features, dark hair, deep eyes. I looked for a mirror. I looked at myself carefully. I never looked like Fernando. He was short, thin build, light eyes. I was tall, broad-shouldered, dark eyes. My mother always said I'd inherited my height from her family. Now, I wondered if it had been another white lie. A week later, I got a call from the hospital. Mr. Armando, we need you to come immediately. We have the results. I arrived at the hospital at 10 in the morning. This time, they didn't make me wait. They took me straight to a private office. Dr. Elena, Dr. Ruiz, Dr. Medina, and 2 new people who introduced themselves as legal representatives of the hospital were there. Please sit down, Dr. Elena said. I sat down. My hands were sweating. The DNA test confirmed what we suspected, Dr. Ruiz said. You're Don Sebastian Montalvo's biological son. The probability is 99.99%. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights on the ceiling. I could hear my heart beating so hard I thought everyone else could hear it too. That means, one of the lawyers continued, that you have the legal right to claim Don Sebastian Montalvo's inheritance. Since there are no other confirmed direct heirs, you'd be the sole beneficiary of his estate. $800 million. I who cleaned bathrooms for $800 a month. I who lived in an apartment where cockroaches walked on the walls. I to whom Ingrid had said, "You're going to die poor." I was the heir to one of the richest men in Mexico. This can't be real, I whispered. It's very real, Dr. Medina said. But now comes the complicated part. You have to start a legal process to officially claim the inheritance. You're going to need specialized lawyers. You're going to need more evidence. There will be disputes. This is going to take time. How much time? Months. Maybe a year. But with these DNA tests, your case is solid. One of the hospital's lawyers handed me a card. This is the best law firm in the country for succession issues. Ask for attorney Diana Mendez. Tell her you're referred by the General Hospital. She'll know what to do. I left the hospital in a state of total shock. I walked the streets for hours aimlessly. People passed by me laughing, talking, living their normal lives. I just discovered that my whole life had been built on a lie, that the man who raised me wasn't my biological father, that my mother had kept an impossible secret until her death. Why didn't she ever tell me the truth? Did Fernando know I wasn't his biological son? Did Don Sebastian Montalvo ever know I existed? The questions burned inside me, but the people who could answer them were all dead. That night, lying in my bed, I looked at the stained ceiling of my miserable apartment. I thought about Ingrid. I thought about Ricardo. I thought about everything they'd taken from me. I thought about the words she'd said to me with that cruel smile. You're going to die poor. And for the first time in 2 years, I smiled. The next day, I called the number they'd given me. A receptionist with a professional voice answered. Mendez and Associates Law Firm. Good morning. I need to speak with attorney Diana Mendez. I'm referred by the General Hospital. There was a pause. Your name? Armando. One moment, please. Hold music played for 30 seconds. Then, a firm and direct female voice spoke. I'm Diana Mendez. The hospital called me yesterday. I need you to come to my office today, if possible. Can you make it at 3 in the afternoon? Yes. Bring any document you have about your family, birth certificate, IDs, old photographs, whatever. She hung up without saying goodbye. At 3 o'clock sharp, I was standing in front of a corporate building in Polanco, one of the most exclusive areas in Mexico City. Diana Mendez's offices were on the 18th floor. When I got out of the elevator, I saw glass doors with gold letters. Inside, everything was elegant. Marble floors, leather furniture, employees dressed as if going to a presidential meeting. I arrived in my janitor clothes, worn-out pants, a shirt with a bleach stain, old shoes. The receptionist looked at me with distrust. But when I gave my name, her expression changed immediately. Mr. Armando has arrived, she said on the phone. Then she looked at me with a polite smile. Come in, please. Second door on the right. Diana Mendez was a woman in her 40s, short hair, impeccable dark suit. A gaze that pierced right through you. She shook my hand firmly. Sit down. Her office had an incredible view of the city. Huge windows, a fine wooden desk, shelves full of law books. She sat across from me and opened a folder. The hospital sent me the DNA tests. They're conclusive. You're Don Sebastian Montalvo's biological son. That's not in doubt. What we need now is to build a solid legal case to claim the inheritance. How hard is it going to be? Very hard, she said bluntly. Montalvo's inheritance is valued at $2.8 billion. There are at least 8 claimants who've already started legal proceedings. They're all going to fight. They're going to hire investigators to discredit you. They'll look for any mistake, any inconsistency. They're going to say the tests are faked. They'll make your life impossible. And do you think we can win? She stared at me with these DNA tests. Yes, but I need you to tell me everything, absolutely everything about your family, your mother, your father, anything you remember. For the next 2 hours, I told her about my life. I talked about Lilia, my mother. I talked about Fernando, the man who raised me. I showed her old photographs I brought, birth certificates, my college degree. Everything I could find. Diana listened in silence, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she clasped her hands and took a deep breath. Your mother worked as an executive secretary at Montalvo Construction for 6 months in 1966. I have access to old employment records. She was 24 years old. Don Sebastian Montalvo was 28 and had just founded the company. He was single, ambitious. He worked 18 hours a day. My heart was beating faster and faster. According to the records, Diana continued. Your mother resigned abruptly in October of that year. A month later, she married Fernando. You were born in June of the following year, 8 months after the wedding. But if we do the math backward, your conception happened exactly when your mother was still working at Montalvo Construction. So it was real. I said quietly. My mother had a relationship with Don Sebastian Montalvo. It's the only logical explanation. And there's more. I found something interesting reviewing old documents. Your mother received a single payment of $50,000 in November 1966. A huge amount for that time. The payment came from a personal account of Don Sebastian Montalvo, $50,000. In 1966, that was a fortune. Why would he have given her that money? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Because she was pregnant with you, and he paid her to disappear, to marry another man, so the child she was expecting would never carry his last name. I felt rage. I felt pain. I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't name. Don Sebastian Montalvo built his empire by being ruthless, Diana said. He didn't want complications. He didn't want a family. He just wanted power and money. So he paid your mother, so you'd never officially exist. But I existed. Yes. And now, ironically, you're his only legal heir. Diana took more documents out her folder. I'm going to be honest with you. Armando, this process is going to change your life in ways you can't imagine. Once we file the claim, Your name will be in all the newspapers. People are going to investigate every detail of your past. They'll look for mistakes. They're going to try to destroy your credibility. Are you ready for that? I lost everything 2 years ago. I said my wife, my company, my dignity. I've got nothing left to lose. She smiled slightly. Let's begin then. My fee is 20% of what we recover. It's a lot of money, but I guarantee you that without me, you won't win this case. 20% of $2.8 billion was $560 million, an obscene amount. But if she got me the other 80%, I was going to have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I accept, I said. We signed a contract that same afternoon. Diana explained that the process would take months. First, we had to file the formal lawsuit. Then there'd be hearings, more evidence, expert testimonies. The other claimants were going to hire the best lawyers in the country to stop us. But we have something they don't have, Diana said with a cold smile. We have the truth, and we have irrefutable scientific proof. I left her office feeling different. I was no longer Armando the janitor. I was no longer Armando the man who'd lost everything. I was Armando the heir, the secret son of Don Sebastian Montalvo. But I still had to keep cleaning bathrooms. I still had to pay the rent for my miserable apartment because until the judge ruled officially, I was still poor. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept thinking about my mother, about Lilia, the woman who'd given me life and who'd kept the biggest secret of my existence until her death. Why didn't she ever tell me? Was she afraid? Was she ashamed? Or did she just want to protect me from a truth that could have destroyed me? I remembered her last days. She died of cancer 8 years ago. I spent weeks by her side in the hospital. Ingrid went with me at first, but then she stopped going. She said she couldn't stand seeing people die. On one of those nights, when my mother could barely speak because of the morphine, she took my hand and said something I never understood. Forgive me, son. Forgive me for not being brave. I thought she was talking about her illness, about not going to the doctor in time, but now I understood. She was asking me for forgiveness for hiding the truth from me, for living a lie for 58 years. I forgive you, Mom. I whispered in the dark of my room. I forgive you. 3 weeks later, Diana officially filed the succession lawsuit. The next day, my name was in all the newspapers. 58-year-old janitor claims $2.8 billion inheritance. Don Sebastian Montalvo's secret son appears 33 years after his death. DNA tests confirm poor worker is heir to Montalvo empire. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, TV channels, people claiming to be my relatives, lawyers offering their services, scammers inventing stories. I had to change my number. At work, my coworkers looked at me differently, some with envy, others with distrust. My supervisor called me to his office. Armando, I understand you have a complicated legal situation, but I need you to keep working until this is resolved. Can I count on you? Yes, sir. And I kept cleaning bathrooms, kept mopping floors, kept taking out trash because I still needed those $800 a month to survive. But something had changed. Now, when I cleaned, I smiled because I knew every day that passed was one day closer to justice. One day closer to proving Ingrid wrong. One day closer to making Ricardo pay for everything he'd done to me. 2 months after filing the lawsuit, Diana called me to her office again. This time her expression was serious. We have a problem, she said, closing the door behind me. My stomach tightened. What happened? One of the other claimants hired private investigators. They found something about your recent past, something they'll use to discredit you. What did they find? She put a folder on the desk. Inside were photographs of me cleaning bathrooms, copies of my pay stubs, documents about my company's bankruptcy, and something else that made my blood freeze. They found your ex-wife. Diana said, Ingrid, she's already given 2 interviews to the press. She says you were a failure, that you lost your company due to incompetence, that you were violent with her, that you lied throughout your marriage. I closed my eyes. Of course Ingrid would do this. People believe her, some do. The other claimant's lawyers are using her statements to argue that you don't have the moral character to manage an empire like Montalvo Construction. They're saying you're a liar, a failure, someone who destroys everything he touches. That's not true. I know, Diana said, but we need proof. We need to prove your ex-wife is lying. Do you have anything? Messages, emails, witnesses who can confirm your version. I thought about those years with Ingrid. I remember the times she came home late smelling of perfume, which wasn't hers, the messages she hid, the calls she answered in another room. I always knew, but I never had concrete proof until the day I found them together. I have something better, I said. I have the name of the man she cheated on me with. Ricardo Salazar. Diana raised her eyebrows. The owner of Salazar Real Estate Group. Yes, he was the one who destroyed my company, contacted my clients, threatened my suppliers. He sabotaged me systematically, and Ingrid knew it. She was with him since before the divorce. Can you prove it? I have the testimony of the client who told me what Ricardo was doing. I have emails where my suppliers explained that someone had pressured them, and I have the dates. Everything coincides exactly with the moment Ingrid started her relationship with Ricardo. Diana leaned forward. Her eyes shone with something that looked like hunger. Armando, what you just told me is much more important than you think. If we can prove Ricardo Salazar deliberately sabotaged your company, we don't just discredit your ex-wife. We also have cause for a massive civil lawsuit against him. What kind of lawsuit? Malicious interference in business relations, corporate sabotage, conspiracy to commit fraud. We could sue him for $50 million or more. And with your current situation as Montalvo's heir, that lawsuit has real teeth. For the first time in months, I felt something similar to true hope, but there's something else, Diana continued. I need you to understand the connection. Ricardo Salazar has been trying to buy properties from Montalvo Construction for the past 3 years. While the inheritance was in dispute, he made offers for buildings, land, company assets, very low offers, taking advantage of the legal limbo. And if you win the succession case, all those negotiations are invalidated. You'd be the legal owner and could reject any previous offer. Ricardo would lose millions. That's why he has a personal interest in you not winning. That's why your ex-wife is giving interviews. She's being used by him. Everything started to make sense. Ricardo hadn't destroyed me just out of competition. He destroyed me because he knew something I didn't know. He knew who my biological father was. He knew that someday I could discover the truth, and he wanted to make sure that when that day came, I wouldn't have credibility or resources to fight. How could he know before me? I asked. Diana took out another document. 4 years ago, Ricardo hired a corporate genealogy company. It's a common practice among large developers. They investigate family lines of important businessmen to identify possible heirs before they themselves know it. It's valuable information for future negotiations. So, he knew I was Montalvo's son 4 years ago, probably. And when he realized you were an architect, that you had a small but growing company, that you could eventually become real competition if you inherited, he decided to eliminate you preventively. The rage I felt at that moment was different from anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't hot and impulsive rage. It was cold and calculated rage. Ricardo had planned my destruction years in advance. He'd used me as a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I want to sue him, I said. I want him to pay for everything. We will, Diana promised. But first we need to win the succession case. Once you're officially Montalvo's heir, you'll have the resources and legal power to go after Ricardo with everything. Until then, we keep building the case. I left her office with renewed determination. That night in my apartment, I took an old box out of the closet. Inside were all my company's documents, canceled contracts, supplier emails, client letters, everything I kept before closing for good. I reviewed every paper for hours. I found exactly what Diana needed. Emails where suppliers carefully explained to me that someone important had suggested they stop working with me. Messages from clients saying they'd received very convenient offers if they canceled their contracts. I even found a handwritten note from one of my former employees where he mentioned that Salazar Group had contacted him with an impossible-to-refuse offer. I photographed everything and sent it to Diana. The next day, she filed a motion with the judge. She argued that the opposing claimants were using intimidation and defamation tactics. She attached the evidence of my case. The judge ordered a formal investigation into Ingrid's accusations. A week later, Ingrid was subpoenaed to testify under oath. Diana told me not to attend. "Let me handle this," she said. But I needed to be there. I needed to see her. I needed to look her in the eyes while she lied. I arrived at the courthouse early. I sat in the back of the room. When Ingrid walked in, I barely recognized her. She wore an expensive dress, shiny jewelry, perfect makeup. She looked like a millionaire's wife, which was exactly what she was. Ricardo was with her, tall, tanned, designer suit. He saw me and smiled. That same arrogant smile he'd given me the day I found in my bed with my wife. Diana started the interrogation calmly. Simple questions about the marriage, about the divorce, about the accusations Ingrid had made in the press. Ingrid answered confidently. Yes, Armando had been violent. Yes, he'd lost his company due to incompetence. Yes, he'd lied about many things during the marriage. Then Diana changed tactics. When did your relationship with Ricardo Salazar begin? Ingrid hesitated. After the divorce. Are you sure? Yes. Diana took out a piece of paper. I have hotel records here. Presidential suite booked under Ricardo Salazar's name. 7 months before your divorce. The reservation included 2 people. Can you explain why your name appears on the visitor log? Ingrid turned pale. Ricardo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That must be a mistake. A mistake. Is it also a mistake that your credit card was used in the restaurant of that same hotel that same night? Ingrid didn't answer. Her lawyer stood up quickly. Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant to the succession case. It's completely relevant. Diana answered with a firm voice. The witness has publicly accused my client of being a liar and a violent man. I'm proving that the one who actually lied during the marriage was her. This goes directly to her credibility as a witness. The judge nodded. Objection overruled. The witness will answer. Ingrid looked at Ricardo seeking help. He wasn't looking at her. He had his jaw clenched and his eyes fixed on the table. Yes, Ingrid finally said. Ricardo and I were seeing each other before the divorce, but that doesn't change the fact that Armando was a bad husband. Interesting, Diana said. And is it true that Ricardo Salazar systematically contacted your husband's company's clients and suppliers to sabotage his business? I don't know what you're talking about. Diana took out more documents, emails, messages, testimonies. She placed them one by one in front. Do you recognize this email? It was sent from Ricardo Salazar's account to one of your husband's main clients. It offers a 40% discount if they cancel their contract with Armando and hire Salazar Group. Did you know this? Ingrid didn't answer. She was sweating. Her perfect makeup was starting to run. Did you know your boyfriend was deliberately destroying your husband's business while you were still married to him? I wasn't involved in that, but you knew it. Silence. Answer, please. Yes, Ingrid whispered. I knew it. A murmur ran through the room. The journalists present typed frantically. Ricardo had stood up and was leaving the room. His lawyer tried to stop him, but he ignored him. Diana continued relentlessly. So, you knew Ricardo Salazar was committing corporate sabotage against your husband? And not only did you not stop him, but you participated in the plan by divorcing Armando at the exact moment his company was collapsing. Is that correct? Ingrid started crying. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and humiliation. He promised me a better life, she said between sobs. Armando was never going to give me what I wanted. Ricardo had real money, real power. I just did what any smart woman would have done. Diana smiled coldly. Thank you. I have no more questions. Ingrid's lawyer tried to repair the damage with more questions, but it was too late. She'd admitted everything under oath, complicity, deceit, sabotage. When the hearing ended, I left the courthouse quickly. I didn't want to talk to anyone, but Ingrid caught up with me in the parking lot. Armando, wait. I stopped. I turned around slowly. She looked destroyed. Smeared makeup, red eyes, wrinkled expensive dress. She was no longer the beautiful and confident woman who'd entered the room. What do you want? I asked with a flat voice. I need you to understand. It wasn't personal, I just wanted. What did you want, Ingrid? Money, power, a life of luxury while I cleaned bathrooms. She didn't answer. You told me I was going to die poor. I continued. Do you remember? You laughed at me. You enjoyed my pain. And now what? Now you come to ask for my forgiveness because things didn't go as you planned. I didn't know you were. She started to say, Montalvo's son. No, you didn't know. Ricardo didn't know. He destroyed me preventively because he knew that someday I could be his real competition. And you were his tool. He used you. Ingrid. He used you like he'd use any disposable object. She turned pale. That's not true. Ricardo loves me. I laughed. It was a bitter laugh with no humor. Where is he now? He ran out of the room as soon as things got tough. He left you there alone, sinking, because to him you aren't more important than I was. You're just another piece on his board. Ingrid started crying again. This time they were real tears. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You aren't sorry, I said coldly. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I turned around and walked to my car. She called me several more times, but I didn't stop. That night Diana called me excitedly. Ingrid's testimony was perfect. The other claimants are withdrawing from a case. Without her testimony as a weapon, they don't have solid arguments. And Ricardo Salazar just received a formal summons. The prosecutor's office is investigating his business practices. What does that mean? It means he not only lost his chance to buy Montalvo properties, he's also going to face criminal charges for corporate sabotage, and we're going to sue him civilly for damages. I'm estimating we can get at least $60 million. $60 million more than my entire company would have been worth in its entire existence. How much time until the succession case is resolved? I asked with the other claimants withdrawing. Maybe 2 months, 3 at most. The judge already has all the evidence. It's just a matter of time. 2 months. After 2 years of poverty, of humiliation, of cleaning bathrooms, there are only 2 months left for everything to change. But those 2 months were the hardest of my life. Not because of the work, not because of the money, but because of the wait. Every day, I woke up wondering if that would be the day the judge would issue the ruling. Every night, I went to bed knowing it hadn't happened yet. During that time, something strange started to happen. People at work treated me differently. I wasn't just Armando the janitor anymore. I was the guy who's going to inherit billions. Some treated me with exaggerated respect, others with barely hidden envy. My supervisor called me one day, Armando, I understand you're going to leave this job soon. I just want you to know you've been an exemplary employee. If you ever need a reference. It was pathetic. When I was poor, nobody respected me. Now that I might be rich, everyone wanted to be my friend. I rejected his words politely and kept working. Every bathroom I cleaned, every floor I mopped, I did it with a strange feeling of farewell. I knew this would soon end. I knew my life would soon change forever. But a part of me was afraid. Afraid that something would go wrong. Afraid that the judge would decide against me. Afraid that all this was a cruel dream and I'd wake up again in my reality of poverty. One night, while I was cleaning the last bathroom in the building, an older man walked in. He was the owner of the building. I'd only seen him a couple of times in 2 years. You're Armando? He asked. Yes, sir. He looked me up and down. I've been following your case in the news. It's fascinating. A janitor who turns out to be heir to a fortune. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I just want you to know something. He continued. I was poor once too. I worked in construction for 20 years before owning my first building. I know what it feels like to be at the bottom, and I know how easy it is to forget it when you get to the top. He stared at me. Don't forget who you are, Armando. Don't forget what you lived through. Because the day you forget it, you'll become someone like the ones who destroyed you. He left without saying more. His words stayed with me all that night. All the next day, they made me think about who I wanted to be when everything was over. Did I want to be like Ricardo, like Don Sebastian Montalvo, men who built empires but destroyed people? Or did I want to do something different? 3 weeks later, I received the call that would change everything. It was Diana. Her voice sounded different, excited, triumphant. The judge issued the ruling. We won. My heart stopped for a second. What? We won, Armando. The judge declared that you're the only legitimate heir to Don Sebastian Montalvo. All the assets, properties, bank accounts, company shares, everything is yours. Officially, legally, the ruling is final. I sat on the floor of the bathroom I was cleaning. My legs wouldn't support me. 2 years. 2 years of poverty. 2 years of humiliation. 2 years of cleaning other people's dirt. And now, in an instant, it was all over. When can I? Tomorrow, Diana interrupted. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, we'll sign all the documents. At 10, the bank will give you access to the accounts. At 11, you'll officially be the richest man in Mexico. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of nervousness, but because I needed to process what was happening. I looked around my miserable apartment, the cracked walls, the stained ceiling, the broken window I could never fix. This had been my home for 2 years. This was what Ingrid thought would be my grave. You're going to die poor. I smiled in the dark. No, Ingrid, I'm not going to die poor. At 8 in the morning, I arrived at Diana's offices. This time I wasn't wearing my janitor clothes. I bought a cheap suit at a thrift store. It wasn't elegant, but it was dignified. Diana was waiting for me with a huge smile, ready to sign your new life. For the next 2 hours, I signed documents, hundreds of pages, contracts, transfers, authorizations. Every signature brought me closer to something that still didn't feel real. At 10 o'clock sharp, a bank executive arrived personally. He brought a leather folder and an electronic tablet. Mr. Armando, he said with a bow that bordered on ridiculous. It's an honor to present you the complete statement of your accounts. He opened the tablet, showed numbers my brain couldn't completely process. Main account, $10 billion in cash. Shares of Montalvo Construction, valued at $1.6 billion. Real estate properties, 53 buildings valued at $400 million. Land, 27 properties under development valued at $200 million. Diverse investments, $300 million. Total, $3.7 billion. More than they'd initially estimated, because the company had kept growing during the 3 years the inheritance was in dispute. Do you want to make any immediate transfer? The executive asked. I thought of my past due rent, the light and water bills I hadn't been able to pay, my credit card debt. Altogether, it added up to maybe $2,000, an amount that used to keep me awake. Now it was less than the tip I'd probably give the waiter my next lunch. Yes, I said, I want to pay all my pending debts, and I want to transfer $50,000 to my personal account. The executive seemed disappointed. He probably expected me to ask for millions immediately, but I wasn't going to be that kind of person. Also, I continued. I want to make a donation to the General Hospital where the doctors who discover my DNA worked. $1 million for their emergency department. Diana smiled. The executive nodded and took note. Anything else? Yes, I want the complete list of all current employees of Montalvo Construction, from executives to cleaning staff, and I want a meeting with the board of directors for tomorrow. I left the bank feeling strange. Technically, I was a billionaire, but I still had the same cheap suit. I still lived in the same horrible apartment. I was still the same person who'd cleaned bathrooms yesterday. The first thing I did was go to my job, my former job. I went in through the service door, as usual. My supervisor saw me and ran towards me. Armando, I heard the news. Congratulations. I guess you're here to resign. Yes, I said, but I want to do something first. I went to the cleaning room. There were my 3 co-workers, Jorge, Manuel, and Carmen. People who'd worked with me for 2 years. People who never treated me differently for being poor. People who shared their food with me when I didn't have money for lunch. I need to talk to you, I said. All 3 looked at me curiously. I took them to a nearby cafe. I ordered for everyone. When the food arrived, I took a deep breath. I won the case. I'm officially the heir to Montalvo Construction. Jorge almost spit out his coffee. Manuel dropped his fork. Carmen looked at me with huge eyes. It's not a joke. I continued. I want to do something for you. You were the only ones who treated me like a human being when I had nothing. So each of you is going to receive $100,000, no strings attached, just as a thank you. Carmen started to cry. Jorge was in shock. Manuel hugged me so hard I almost couldn't breathe. You don't have to do this, Jorge said with a broken voice. I know, but I want to. That afternoon, I hired a personal assistant, a professional woman named Lilia. Yes, I specifically asked for her to have that name. It was my way of honoring my mother. Lilia, I need you to help me with something. I want to buy an apartment. Nothing flashy, something comfortable, safe, in a good neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, decent kitchen, nice view. She seemed surprised. Just that. With your resources, you could buy a mansion. I don't want a mansion. I want a home. I also asked her to look for the best criminal lawyers in the country. We're going after Ricardo Salazar with everything. I wanted to pay for every law he broke, every client he intimidated, every supplier he threatened, everything. Lilia smiled. Understood. The next day, I had my first meeting as the owner of Montalvo Construction. The board of directors was made up of 8 people, all older men, all with expensive suits, all looking at me with a mix of curiosity and distrust. Gentlemen, I began. I know you don't know me. I know you didn't expect the heir to be someone like me, a 58-year-old janitor with no experience in corporate management. Several of them exchanged glances, but I continued. I spent 20 years running my own architecture firm. I know how buildings are built, I know how clients are treated, and I know something Don Sebastian Montalvo probably never knew. I know what it feels like to be at the bottom. I leaned forward. This company is going to change. We aren't going to keep being just a money-making machine. We're going to be a company that builds responsibly, that treats its employees well, that pays fair wages, that respects its competitors. One of the directors, an older man named Jorge, raised his hand. With all due respect, Mr. Armando, that sounds very noble, but this company has obligations to shareholders, to investors. We can't just change everything because you had a hard life. I'm the sole shareholder, I said firmly. This company is mine, 100% mine. There are no external investors. There are no obligations to anyone other than myself. So yes, we're going to change everything. Absolute silence in the room. Now, then I continued. I understand you have valuable experience. That's why I'm not going to fire anyone, but I'm going to make changes. We're going to review all employment contracts. We're going to increase salaries. We're going to implement better working conditions, and anyone who doesn't agree can resign right now with a generous severance package. Nobody moved. Excellent. Let's begin then. Over the next few weeks, I transformed the company from the inside. I increased the minimum wage of all workers by 30%. I implemented full health insurance for all employees and their families. I created a scholarship program for the children of workers who wanted to study architecture or engineering, and I started to personally investigate every project the company had in development. I wanted to make sure everything was being done correctly, without corruption, without shortcuts, without destroying the competition. I found something interesting in the files. During the last 3 years, while the inheritance was in dispute, Ricardo Salazar had made 17 different offers for properties of Montalvo Construction, all rejected by the board of directors, all for ridiculously low prices. He'd been trying to take advantage of the legal chaos to steal valuable assets. I called Diana. I have more ammunition against Ricardo, ready for the civil lawsuit. More than ready, she replied with a smile audible in her voice. The civil lawsuit against Ricardo Salazar was filed on a Monday morning. Diana and her team prepared a case so solid it seemed like a legal fortress: corporate sabotage, malicious interference, conspiracy to commit fraud, threats to suppliers, market manipulation. The list was endless. We asked for $80 million in compensation, more than double what my company would have been worth at its best moment. But it wasn't about the money. It was about justice. Ricardo tried to settle out of court. His lawyer called Diana 3 times in the first week. They offered $20 million, then 30, then 40. Diana rejected everything. My client isn't interested in settlements, she told them coldly. See you in court. The trial started 2 months later. The room was full of journalists. This was the case of the year. The billionaire janitor against the real estate tycoon, David against Goliath. Except now David had unlimited resources and Goliath was bleeding money on lawyers. I sat in the front row, wearing a new suit, not flashy, but of good quality. I wanted Ricardo to see me. I wanted him to remember the man he'd tried to destroy. When Ricardo walked in, I noticed he'd aged. He had deep dark circles. He lost weight. The last few months had been hard for him. The tax investigations, the clients canceling contracts, the banks denying him loans. His empire was slowly collapsing. Our gazes crossed. He looked away. First, Diana presented the case with surgical precision. She showed emails where Ricardo gave explicit instructions to sabotage my company, testimonies from clients who admitted being pressured, phone records proving constant communication between Ricardo and Ingrid during my marriage. It was all there, documented, irrefutable. Ricardo's lawyer tried to argue that they were just aggressive, but legal business practices. Diana destroyed him with case law, similar cases where businessmen had been convicted for the exact same tactics. The most shocking moment came when Diana called Fernando to the stand. No, not my father Fernando, another Fernando, a former employee of Ricardo who'd resigned 6 months ago. Why did you resign from Salazar Group? Diana asked. Fernando, a man in his 40s with a tired expression, took a deep breath because they asked me to do things that weren't ethical, investigate competitors, look for personal information, use that information to pressure them. Can you be more specific? They asked me to investigate Armando, his company, his personal life, everything. Mr. Salazar wanted to know everything about him. He wanted to find weaknesses he could exploit. When was that? 4 years ago, long before Armando knew he was Montalvo's son. But Mr. Salazar already knew. He'd hired genealogists. He knew Armando would eventually inherit and wanted to eliminate him before that happened. The murmur in the room was deafening. The judge had to ask for silence 3 times. Ricardo was pale. His lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. Fernando had documents, emails, proof of everything he was saying. When his testimony ended, Diana turned to the judge. Your Honor, this wasn't an error of judgment. It wasn't an aggressive business practice. It was a deliberate and premeditated conspiracy to destroy my client's life. Ricardo Salazar knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it without remorse. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day brought new revelations, more emails, more testimonies, more proof of everything Ricardo had done, not just to me, but to dozens of other small competitors over the years. Finally, the judge issued the ruling. After reviewing all the evidence presented, this court finds Ricardo Salazar and Salazar Real Estate Group guilty of all charges. The payment of $75 million in compensation to the plaintiff is ordered. Additionally, a full criminal investigation into the defendant's business practices is ordered. Ricardo collapsed in his chair. His lawyer tried to console him, but it was useless. $75 million. His company couldn't survive that. Not with all the other lawsuits appearing, not with the banks cutting off his credit, not with the clients fleeing. I left the courthouse feeling strange. I'd won. I got injustice, but I didn't feel the euphoria I expected. I only felt tired. Diana caught up with me in the parking lot. $75 million. It's more than we expected. Congratulations. How much time does he have to pay? 90 days. But between you and me, I don't think he can. Salazar Group is technically bankrupt. He'll have to sell assets, maybe even declare bankruptcy. And what happens if he declares bankruptcy? Then you recover what you can from what's left, maybe 20 or 30 million. But the most important thing is that he's destroyed. His reputation, his company, all that was exactly what I'd wanted, right? Watching him fall like he made me fall, watching him lose everything like I lost everything. But now that it was happening, I felt empty. That night, alone in my new apartment, I looked out the window at the illuminated city. I bought a comfortable place in a good neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, nice view, nothing flashy, nothing screaming I'm rich, just a dignified home. I thought about Ricardo. I thought about everything he'd done to me. The pain, the humiliation, the 2 years of poverty. I thought about Ingrid laughing while saying, "You're going to die poor." And I thought about the owner of the building where I worked. His words, "Don't forget who you are, because the day you forget, you'll become someone like the ones who destroyed you." What did I really want? To destroy Ricardo like he destroyed me, or to be something better? The next day, I called Diana. "I need to talk to you about the lawsuit against Ricardo. What's wrong? I want to make a proposal, one that'll probably seem crazy to you." We met in her office that afternoon. I explained my idea. She looked at me as if I'd gone crazy. "Are you sure about this? After everything he did to you?" "I'm sure. It's your decision, but I want you to think it through. You don't have to be magnanimous with someone who tried to destroy you." "I know, but I need to do this for me, not for him." A week later, Ricardo's lawyer received a proposal. Ricardo would pay $20 million immediately. The rest of the debt would be forgiven under 3 conditions. First, Ricardo had to sell Salazar Group completely. He couldn't keep any shares. Second, he had to publicly admit everything he'd done. No excuses, no justifications. a full confession in a press conference. Third, for the next 5 years, he couldn't start any business related to real estate or construction. Basically, I was taking him out of the industry. I was destroying him professionally, but I was giving him a financial way out. 20 million was nothing compared to 75. It would allow him to live comfortably if he was smart. Ricardo accepted. He had no other choice. The press conference was broadcast on all major channels. Ricardo, dressed in a simple suit, stood in front of dozens of cameras and microphones. "My name is Ricardo Salazar." He began with a broken voice. "For the last 20 years, I built an empire using tactics I now recognize as immoral and illegal. I sabotaged competitors, threatened suppliers, destroyed small companies to eliminate competition, and it all culminated when I deliberately destroyed Armando's life and company." He paused. I could see he was struggling to keep his composure. I knew Armando was Don Sebastian Montalvo's son years before he discovered it. I hired genealogists, investigated his family, and when I saw he had a small but growing company, I decided to eliminate him before he became a real threat. I used his wife, manipulated his clients, ruined everything he'd built with years of honest work. Tears began to stream down his face. I don't know if they were real or acted. I didn't care. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he continued. "But Armando, in an act of generosity I neither understand nor deserve, has given me a way out. I fully accept the consequences of my actions. I'm selling my company, leaving the industry, and paying what I can of the debt I owe him." "Armando," he said, looking directly at the camera, "if you're watching this, I want you to know I genuinely feel all the pain I caused. I wish I could give you back the 2 years I stole from you, but I can't. I can only say I was wrong and that you're a better man than I'll ever be." The conference ended. Journalists exploded with questions, but Ricardo didn't answer any. He simply left. I watched the whole broadcast from my office at Montalvo Construction. Lilia, my assistant, was by my side. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know." I answered honestly. "I won, but it doesn't feel like I thought it would feel." "That's because you're a good person," Lilia said softly. "Good people don't enjoy the destruction of others, even when it's justified." She was right. 3 months after the ruling against Ricardo, my life had found a strange rhythm. I wasn't poor anymore. I didn't clean bathrooms anymore. I no longer lived in fear of not being able to pay rent, but I didn't feel like the rich people I'd met either. I didn't want yachts. I didn't want mansions. I didn't want a life of empty luxury. I wanted something else, something with meaning. One afternoon, while reviewing documents in my office, Lilia came in with a serious expression. "There's someone here who wants to see you. She says it's urgent." "Who?" "Ingrid." My first instinct was to say no, to kick her out, that I never wanted to see her again, but something stopped me. Curiosity. Maybe I needed to close that chapter completely. "Send her in." Ingrid walked in minutes later. She looked very different from the last time I'd seen her at the courthouse. She wasn't wearing expensive jewelry. Her clothes were simple. Her makeup was minimal, and in her eyes there was something I'd never seen before. Real shame. "Thanks for seeing me," she said with a soft voice. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, waiting for her to speak. "I don't know where to start." She continued, sitting in the chair across from my desk. "You probably think I'm here to ask you for money or beg you to forgive me. But it's not that. Then what do you want?" "I want you to know the truth, the whole truth, because I think you deserve it." She wiped the tears that were starting to form. "Ricardo left me 2 weeks after the press conference. He said I was a burden, that my testimony at the trial had ruined everything. He kicked me out of his house with a suitcase and $5,000, nothing else." I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that, only sadness for her. "I lost everything," she continued. "The house we shared was his. The car was his. The bank accounts were his. I had nothing in my name because I was so stupid I thought he'd always be there." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know you were right. In the courthouse parking lot, when you told me Ricardo had used me, you were right. He never loved me. I was just a tool, a way to get to you, to keep you distracted while he destroyed your company." She took a deep breath. "I knew it. Armando, I knew what he was doing, and I participated because I thought in the end I'd have a better life. I thought it was worth betraying you for money and status, but I was wrong, so wrong. Did you come here to ask for forgiveness? I didn't come to tell you I don't deserve your forgiveness. I came to tell you you were a good husband, that you worked hard for us, that I was the one who failed, not you. And I came to tell you something else. She took an envelope out of her purse and put on my desk. These are the original divorce papers. When we signed them, Ricardo's lawyer kept copies. I recently discovered he manipulated the terms, added clauses that hurt you more than necessary, things I didn't know. These documents prove the fraud. You can use it if you want to sue Ricardo for more money. I looked at the envelope without touching it. Why are you giving me this now? Because I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of being the horrible person I became. And because even though I don't deserve your forgiveness, I need to start doing things right, even if it's late. She got up to leave, reached the door, and stopped. One last thing. I saw what you did with Ricardo. You gave him a way out. You could have completely destroyed him, but you didn't. That shows who you really are and makes me regret betraying you even more. She left without looking back. I was left alone in my office. Looking at the envelope, I finally opened it. Indeed, there was evidence of legal manipulation. I could use this to get millions more from Ricardo, but what for? I already had more money than I could spend. I'd already won. I called Diana. I have more evidence against Ricardo. Fraud in the divorce documents. Do you want me to file another lawsuit? I want you to archive everything. The case is closed. I'm not going to pursue him anymore. Are you sure? Completely. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair and thought about everything that had happened. From the day I found Ingrid with Ricardo, from the day I lost my company, from that cut on my arm that took me to the hospital, from the moment I discovered who my real father was. Everything had been a path to this moment, and now that I was here, I had to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. I remembered the words of the building owner. Don't forget who you are. I was Armando, son of Lilia and Fernando. Yes, biologically I was Don Sebastian Montalvo's son, but Fernando was the one who raised me, who taught me values, who showed me how to be a good man. And those values didn't include infinite revenge. They didn't include destroying people for pleasure. They included justice, yes, but they also included mercy when it was appropriate. I made a decision that afternoon, a decision that would change the purpose of my new life. I called a meeting of the board of directors of Montalvo Construction. When everyone was gathered, I announced my plan. We're going to create a foundation, I said. The Fernando Montalvo Foundation, in honor of the man who raised me. The foundation will have a specific purpose, to help young architects and builders from humble families develop their careers. One of the directors raised his hand. What kind of help exactly? Full college scholarships. But not only that, we're also going to offer professional mentoring, access to our client network, interest-free loans to start their own companies. And most importantly, we're going to give them the opportunity nobody gave me when I lost my company. How much money do you plan to allocate to this? Asked another director. $500 million initially and 10% of the annual profits of Montalvo Construction in perpetuity. There were murmurs of surprise around the table. $500 million was a huge amount. I know it seems like a lot. I continued, but we have $3.7 billion in assets. I can afford this, and more importantly, I need to do this because I remember what it feels like to be at the bottom. I remember what it feels like to lose everything and have no one to help you. I don't want others to go through that, if I can help it. Jorge, the oldest director, leaned back in his chair. Don Sebastian would never have done something like that. He believed every person had to fight on their own, that charity made people weak. Then it's a good thing I'm not like Don Sebastian, I said firmly. He was my biological father, but Fernando was my real father, and Fernando taught me that helping others doesn't make them weak, it makes them stronger. The foundation was established 3 months later. We bought a building in the city center, hired 25 people to manage it, and opened calls for the first generation of scholarship recipients. We received over 2,000 applications in the first week. Stories of brilliant young people who couldn't pay for college, of talented architects who lost their jobs in the economic crisis, of builders who had innovative ideas, but no capital to develop them. I read every application personally, every story, every dream, and in each one, I saw a piece of my own story. We selected 100 beneficiaries for the first year, 50 full college scholarships, 30 loans to start companies, 20 advanced mentoring programs. On the day of the opening ceremony, all the scholarship recipients were present, young people from 18 to 40 years old, from all over Mexico, all with stories of struggle, all with dreams that now had a real chance to come true. I stood in front of them to give a speech. I looked at their faces full of hope and excitement and remembered my own face 2 years ago when I thought I'd die poor and forgotten. My name is Armando. I began. 3 years ago, I was a janitor cleaning bathrooms for $800 a month. I lost my company. I'd lost my dignity. I'd lost hope. Several scholarship recipients leaned forward, listening intently, but something changed. Not by luck, not by magic, but by a series of extraordinary events that showed me that life can take impossible turns. Today I'm here because someone, without knowing it, gave me a second chance, and now I want to give you that same chance. This foundation isn't charity. I continued, it's justice. It's the justice the world should offer, but doesn't offer. It's the opportunity everyone deserves, but few receive. And it's my way of honoring the man who raised me, Fernando, who taught me that a person's true value isn't in how much they have, but in how much they give. Applause filled the room. I saw tears on some faces. I saw hope in all of them. After the ceremony, several scholarship recipients came up to talk to me. A young woman named Elena told me she'd been living in a shelter after her family lost everything in a fire. A man named David explained that he'd dropped out of college halfway through his degree because his father got sick and he needed to work. A woman named Carmen hugged me crying and could only say thank you over and over again. Every story reminded me why I was doing this. It wasn't for recognition. It wasn't to feel good about myself. It was because I've been exactly where they were, and I knew that with the right help, with the right opportunity, anyone can rise up. That night, I returned to my apartment exhausted, but satisfied. Lilia had left a note on my desk. This arrived for you. It was a small package with no return address. I opened it curiously. Inside was a handwritten letter and an old photograph. The photograph showed a beautiful young woman next to a tall man with strong features. My mother Lilia and Don Sebastian Montalvo. The letter was dated 30 years ago. It was from my mother, addressed to me but never sent. My dear Armando, it began, if you're reading this, it means you've already discovered the truth. It means you know Fernando isn't your biological father and you're probably confused, angry. Maybe you even hate me for lying to you all your life. My hands trembled holding the paper. I met Sebastian Montalvo when I was 24. I was his secretary. He was young, ambitious, incredibly smart. We fell in love, or at least I thought it was love. He was different with me, kind, attentive. He made me feel special. When I got pregnant, I thought he'd be happy. I thought we'd get married, but I was wrong. He had plans that didn't include a family, plans that didn't include emotional ties. He offered me money to disappear. $50,000. A fortune at that time. I was devastated, but I was also pregnant and alone. Then I met Fernando, a good man, a simple but honest man. I told him the truth. I told him I was pregnant by another man, and he told me something I'll never forget. That baby needs a father, and I need a family. We can help each other. Tears fell on the paper as I read. Fernando raised you as if you were his blood. He loved you unconditionally, never made you feel less, never reminded you that you weren't his biological son. To him, you were his son. And I hope that when you read this, you understand that he was your true father. Not the man who gave you his genes, but the man who gave you his love. I didn't tell you the truth because I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid you'd look for Sebastian and he'd reject you. Afraid Fernando would lose the son he loved so much. It was selfish of me. It was cowardly, and I'm deeply sorry. But I want you to know something else. Sebastian never knew what kind of man you became. He never knew you studied architecture like him. He never knew you built your own company. He never knew you're good, honest, hardworking. He just saw you as a mistake that needed to be corrected with money. If someday you inherit his fortune, please don't let his money turn you into him. Don't let it make you cold. Don't let it make you forget where you come from. Because you're Fernando's son, not Sebastian's, and that's something you should be proud of. The letter ended with her signature. With eternal love, your mother, Lilia. I sat in silence for a long time. The letter answered questions I'd had for months, but it also gave me something more important. It gave me peace. Fernando had known the truth all along and had loved me anyway. That was the kind of man he was. That was the kind of man I wanted to be. I carefully kept the letter along with the photograph. They were treasures I'd value for the rest of my life. The following months were the most satisfying of my existence. The Fernando Montalvo Foundation began to show results. Several scholarship recipients got jobs in top companies. 2 of the entrepreneurs with loans won significant contracts. One of the students, Elena, published an innovative architectural design that won a national award. Montalvo Construction changed too. We were no longer just a money-making machine. We were a company that built with purpose social housing projects, schools in marginalized areas, hospitals in rural communities. We were still profitable, but now the money had meaning. One day, 6 months after founding the foundation, I received an unexpected call. It was Ricardo Armando. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. Speak. I sold my company, paid all my debts, and with what I had left, I'm starting something new, something small, a consulting firm for small businesses, helping them grow without using the tactics I used before. He paused. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know your actions changed me. You could have completely destroyed me, but you didn't, and that made me reflect on the kind of person I'd been. I'm glad to hear that, Ricardo. I said honestly, we all deserve a second chance. Even me, especially you, because if I could get up after hitting rock bottom, you can too. We hung up. I don't know if Ricardo really changed or if he was just saying what he thought I wanted to hear, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt because that's what Fernando would have done. Ingrid reappeared too. She eventually got a job as an administrative assistant in a small company. She lived in a modest apartment. She'd left behind dreams of luxury and learned to live with enough. One day, I ran into her in a cafe. She was alone drinking cheap coffee, reading a book. She saw me, and her expression showed panic, as if she wanted to run away. But I approached her. Can I sit down? She nodded surprised. How are you? I asked. Surviving. She answered honestly, learning to live with less, learning to be a better person. I'm glad to hear that. We stayed in silence for a moment. Then she spoke. Can I ask you something? Why didn't you destroy me? You could have done it. You had the power. You had the reasons because destroying you wouldn't have given me back what I lost. It wouldn't have changed the past. It would only have created more pain. And I've already had enough pain for a lifetime. She started crying silently. I don't deserve your kindness. Maybe not, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Because I need to live with myself, and I can't live being the kind of person who enjoys watching another suffer. We said goodbye amicably. We weren't friends, we never would be, but we weren't enemies either. We were simply 2 people who shared a painful past and were now going our separate ways. A year after discovering my inheritance, I organized a special event, a memorial ceremony for Fernando and Lilia. My real parents, not the biological ones, but the ones who raised me. I invited all the people I'd helped through the foundation. I invited my former co-workers from the building where I was a janitor. I invited the hospital doctors who discovered my DNA. I invited Diana. I invited everyone who'd been part of my journey. In the center of the room were 2 large photographs, one of Fernando, one of Lilia, both smiling, both representing all that was good in this world. These 2 people, I said in front of all the guests, taught me what really matters in life. Not money, not power, not status, but kindness, honesty, hard work, unconditional love. Fernando wasn't my biological father, but he was my true father in all the ways that matter. He taught me to be a good man. He taught me that a person's value isn't in their bank account, but in their character. Lilia, my mother, made mistakes, kept secrets, but she did it out of love, to protect me, to give me a family. And although those secrets caused confusion when I finally discovered them, I now understand she did the best she could with the circumstances she had. I raised my glass to Fernando and Lilia, who gave me something much more valuable than billions of dollars. They gave me values. They gave me character. They gave me the ability to stay human. Even when the world tried to turn me into something else, everyone toasted. Tears flowed freely. They weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude. That night, back in my apartment, I stood in front of the mirror. The same man who'd cleaned bathrooms a year ago looked back at me, but he was also different, not because of the money, not because of the power, but because I now understood something fundamental. True wealth isn't in what you have, but in who you are. And I was Armando, son of Fernando and Lilia, heir to Don Sebastian Montalvo. Yes, but more importantly, heir to the values of the people who truly loved me. Ingrid had said I was going to die poor. She was wrong, but not because I ended up being rich in money. She was wrong because I was never poor where it really mattered. I always had love, I always had values, I always had character, and that I discovered was the true fortune no one could take from me.